There was one particular day when I couldn't ignore it anymore. I was standing there, washing my hands on autopilot, when something made me really look. Not quickly, not distractedly, looking as if it were the first time. And there they were, the lines. They had always been there, but on that day they seemed more alive. I felt a slight warmth, almost like a pulse, and my first reaction was to deny it. This is all in my head. But it didn't go away. In the days that followed, little things started to shift. People saying things to me that seemed like answers. Dreams that didn't fade away when I woke up. A strange feeling that I was late for something, without knowing what. It wasn't fear, it was recognition. And the most uncomfortable part wasn't realizing it. It was admitting that maybe I had always felt it, and spent my whole life pretending I didn't. It usually doesn't arrive as a thought. It arrives as a sensation. A tightening in the chest that has no name. A warmth in the hands that doesn't come from the water. A quiet knot in the stomach that appears before any clear reason does. Most of us were taught to ignore this language early on. To wait for proof. To wait for logic. To wait until we could explain ourselves without sounding dramatic or too sensitive. So we learned to override the body. We learned to smile through discomfort, to push past signals, to call intuition anxiety and move on. But the body keeps score. It reacts long before the mind organizes words. It leans forward or pulls back while the brain is still negotiating. And when we ignore it often enough, the signals don't disappear. They just change form. Fatigue that doesn't make sense. A constant sense of being slightly out of place. The feeling of saying yes while something inside is quietly saying no. This isn't about mysticism. It's about memory. About a part of you that recognizes patterns faster than thought ever could. And maybe the strangest realization isn't that you're feeling something new, but that you felt it many times before. And this is simply the first moment you didn't look away. At some point, attention drifts downward, almost without intention, to the hands. They've always been there, of course. Doing what hands do. Holding, pushing, building, letting go. You rarely stop to really look at them. Not the way you'd look at a photograph or a scar. Not with curiosity, not with patience. But when you do, something feels different. The lines don't look decorative. They look lived in. Traveled. As if they've been quietly recording moments you never thought to archive. Stress, waiting, hope. The years you pushed through something without saying a word. You might notice shapes you swear you'd never seen before. A crossing, a curve. Something that resembles a letter or a moon, or nothing specific at all. Just a feeling that it stands out now, when it didn't before. And the instinct is to question it. To wonder if it's new. If it means something. If you're reading too much into it. But maybe it isn't new. Maybe what's changed isn't the hand, it's the timing. The moment when your awareness finally slows down enough to meet your body where it's been all along. Nothing mystical needs to be claimed here, just this quiet possibility. That parts of you have always been speaking, marking time in their own way, waiting for you to be ready to notice without rushing past. For some people, this sense of noticing doesn't come alone. It brings a familiar ache with it. The feeling of never quite fitting. Not in a dramatic way, nothing obvious. Just a quiet awareness that the world often feels a little too loud, too fast, too shallow. Conversations skim the surface. Expectations move in straight lines. And you keep wondering why everything seems to demand a version of you that feels slightly off. So you adapt. You learn how to blend in, how to soften reactions, how to explain less, feel less, ask for less. You tell yourself everyone feels this way, that discomfort is just part of growing up, part of being responsible, part of life. And for a while, that explanation works, until it doesn't. Because sensitivity doesn't disappear when it's ignored, it turns inward. It shows up as exhaustion that rest doesn't fix, as tension with no clear source, as dreams that repeat themselves, as if trying a different entrance each night. A kind of emotional radar that never fully shuts off. This isn't about being better than others. It's about being tuned differently and living in a world that keeps asking you to lower the volume on something that was never meant to be muted. The discomfort isn't a flaw. It's feedback, a signal that something in your life no longer matches who you are becoming. There comes a point when pretending stops working. Not because everything falls apart, but because the old ways lose their grip. The routines that once kept you steady start to feel hollow. Conversations repeat themselves. Goals you chased for years no longer give you that quiet sense of yes. And even on good days, there's an undercurrent, a feeling that you're moving, but not really going anywhere. This is how transitions announce themselves. They don't arrive with clear instructions or dramatic turning points. They arrive as friction, as resistance, as the sense that something has expired, even if you can't yet name what should replace it. You try to push through anyway. You tell yourself to be patient, to be grateful, to wait it out. But the body doesn't return to autopilot. And for many, this moment gathers around the same stretch of time, not because of predictions or external timelines, but because cycles tend to close when awareness catches up. What once felt tolerable suddenly feels heavy. What once made sense now feels misaligned. The urgency here isn't panic, it's clarity. A soft but persistent knowing that continuing the same way into a new year won't create something new. It will only repeat what has already been outgrown. At this point, doing nothing starts to feel like a choice of its own, not a dramatic one. Just a quiet agreement to stay where you are. And that's usually when the idea of a ritual appears. Not as something mystical or elaborate, but as a pause. A moment that says, this matters enough to be marked. A ritual doesn't need belief. It needs presence. Water running over your hands. A breath taken on purpose. A few seconds where you're not planning, fixing, or analyzing, just noticing. These gestures are simple, almost ordinary, and that's exactly why they work. The body understands them. The nervous system recognizes intention when it's repeated with care. This isn't about asking for change. It's about signaling readiness. When you move slowly, when you act with awareness, something shifts internally. Not all at once, not in fireworks, but in alignment. The mind stops arguing so much. The body relaxes its guard. A line is drawn, not in the world, but within you. A ritual, in this sense, isn't magic. It's a decision made visible. A way of saying, this cycle ends here, and I'm willing to meet what comes next without pretending I don't feel it. The change isn't loud. There's no sudden clarity that answers everything, no dramatic shift that announces itself to the world. What happens instead is quieter and more permanent. You start noticing what drains you faster. Certain conversations feel heavier sooner. Certain choices take less time, not because they're easier, but because you recognize the cost of ignoring yourself now. You become less available for what pulls you out of alignment. Not out of coldness, but out of honesty. There's more space between stimulus and response, a subtle confidence in saying no without rehearsing an explanation. And sometimes, small coincidences begin to feel less random. Not because the world has changed, but because you're finally paying attention in the same direction your body has been pointing all along. This is the part no one warns you about. Once you listen, you can't unhear it. You can distract yourself for a while, but the signal doesn't fade back into noise. It becomes a reference point, a quiet standard. And the path forward isn't about becoming someone new. It's about remembering who you were before you learned to override your instincts, before you adapted so much that you forgot the original shape of your own attention. From here on, the responsibility is gentle, but it's yours.